And one more time, good afternoon. You can spend your time meeting family and having good chats as soon as we are finished, I promise. We are going to be discussing with you where we go from here. In the last session, you will recall there was a gentleman who asked about young people. Where are they? How do you get them interested? Well, you're in the right group right now. Where we go from here, we're going to talk about we're going to have a discussion on the generational experiences of the reservation. At this moment in time, we're going to be in keeping with oral tradition. We're going to show a brief snippet of a film, a documentary done by my cousin Lauren Rich, and give you some context as to what the reservation was. And then we're going to talk to you. We're going to introduce ourselves to you at that point.
This video tells what we currently know about the story of our ancestors and the place in which they lived. They called this place the reservation. The setting for our story is York County, which is shown here in yellow. This area was originally the home of the Kiskiak and other Native American tribes. These tribes were displaced by Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America, founded in 1607. Thanks to Walt Disney, many Americans are probably familiar with the story of Pocahontas. However, many are unaware that the first African slaves in North America arrived in Jamestown in 1619. And still fewer are aware that 300 years later, in 1918, African Americans living on the reservation lost their land to the U.S. Naval Weapons Station at Yorktown, resulting in the erasure of the communities of Charles Corner and Langley. This story has significance beyond the confines of our family. Faculty at the College of William and Mary have pointed out that African Americans have been largely ignored in historical studies, even in Virginia, where African Americans have lived since 1619. They go on to say that this is particularly true of the African Americans who survived the Civil War and established new lives as freedmen in the Tidewater. Tidewater being shorthand for the coastal area in which York County is located. Although a fair amount is known about the lives of African Americans who were enslaved, much less is known about the lives of African Americans who obtained their freedom prior to the Civil War and emancipation. For this reason, faculty at the College of William and Mary believe that understanding the history of freed African Americans who lived on the reservation is crucial to a greater understanding of the history of African Americans as a whole. Our ancestors, Anthony and Octavia Hunley and their 10 children, were residents of the reservation and are a part of this history. During the years 1830 to 1860, large numbers of free African Americans came to York County and other parts of the Tidewater. Anthony and Octavia were born during this period, Anthony in 1844 and Octavia in 1848. According to the 1860 census, conducted 1 year before the Civil War began, Octavia's father, Henry Redcross, was an oysterman, suggesting that he was a free African American. In this year, when Anthony was 16 years old and Octavia was 12, there were 140 free African American families living in York County. A significant number owned the land they farmed, and others owned valuable property such as boats for oystering, livestock, and tools. Historians believe that at least one freed Black community was established in York County by the middle of the 1800s, and testimony by a woman by the name of Fanny Epps, who was born in 1895 and is shown here, suggests that some free African Americans settled on lands now occupied by the Naval Weapons Station prior to the Civil War. This free Black settlement may have been the foundation of the reservation. After the Civil War ended in 1865, there were over 4,200 free African Americans living in York County. The vast majority were self-sufficient, and some were farming the lands of captured plantations, such as the Tinsley Farm. However, living conditions for many African Americans at this time were very difficult. Because of poverty and inadequate medical facilities, many, especially young children, died from diseases like smallpox and malaria. Despite these conditions, by 1880, when Anthony was 36 and Octavia was 32, they had 6 children: Betty, Margaret, William, Anthony, Martha, Jane, and Joseph. It was in this year that Anthony, Octavia's father, Henry Redcross, and others purchased land from the Tinsleys. Purchase of this land is significant because although more African Americans owned land in York County than is commonly thought, many African Americans did not own any land and had to make their living as either tenant farmers or sharecroppers. In fact, over half of the African American farmers in the part of the reservation called the Nelson District were tenant farmers in the year Anthony and Henry purchased their land. After Anthony's purchase of the land, 4 more children followed: Alexander, Catherine, Leah, and Sarah, bringing the total to 10. At this point, we don't know much about the lives of Anthony and Octavia. However, we do know that Anthony died in 1904 at the age of 60 without a will, leaving the land to Octavia. Then, Octavia died in 1912 at the age of 63, also without a will, leaving the undivided land to the 10 children. Octavia was buried in Cheesecake Cemetery, and this is an actual picture of her gravestone. Did you ever wonder where the name Cheesecake came from? It probably was an alteration of Kiskiak, the name of one of the Native American tribes who were displaced from the surrounding land. 6 years after Octavia passed away, and several months before the end of World War I, the residents of the reservation were notified that the government was commandeering their property. Specifically, on August 7, 1918, President Woodrow Wilson issued Presidential Proclamation number 1472, which commandeered 11,000 acres of land in Yorktown. This action affected close to 100 families, a majority of whom were African American, and included the Hunleys. The families were initially given only 30 days to move upon notification of the proclamation. At the time of the proclamation, the government had already taken over and developed a significant amount of land near the reservation, resulting in an increase in population and a shortage of housing. This meant that it would have been very difficult for the evicted families to quickly find new homes. In addition, many of the young men in the area had enlisted or been drafted into service for the war, so they would not have been available to help the older men, women, and children who remained move their belongings. Probably for these reasons, the families enlisted the help of lawyers, including Frank T. Armistead, who ended up writing several briefs to the Navy on behalf of the families. He also took the cases of white landowners on the reservation. On November 1st, 1918, the families began to receive notice to leave in 30 days. On November 2nd, an amended version of the proclamation was released. It stated that the government would provide just compensation, and it also redefined the boundaries of the planned weapons station, leading some families to believe that they would be able to keep their land. 13 days after the amended proclamation, on November 15th, the owners of the commandeered property, along with their lawyers, presented a petition to the government saying in part, "We are owners and residents of the land in York County, Virginia, which has recently been taken over by the government by the President's proclamation of August 7, 1918. We are perfectly willing to make any sacrifice that may be necessary for the good of the government in this time of necessity. But as we believe that the portion of the Navy mine depot that will have to be developed first will be along the river, we respectfully request that the government allow us to remain in possession of our homes until next spring. We respectfully pray that we will not be turned out of doors at this season of the year. In response to the petition, the date of the eviction was delayed until April 1919. We should celebrate this important achievement and be proud of the way in which our ancestors and the other families on the reservation stood up to the government and gained a degree of justice. Upon delay of the eviction, government assessors came to Yorktown to decide how much the residents' properties were worth. Not surprisingly, as suggested in Shannon Mahoney's dissertation on Charles Corner, there appeared to be many ways in which the compensation provided by the government was not in equal exchange for the owners of the land. Perhaps in recognition of this, residents were given the opportunity to testify in front of the Board on Valuation of Commandeered Property in order to contest the rulings about the value of their property. Some family members tried to impress on the Board of Valuation attorneys of the value of their property above and beyond the simple monetary value, as in this exchange between Anthony Hundley Jr. and the presiding attorney. The presiding attorney said, "How much did that house cost when you built it?" Anthony responded, "I guess the house cost me somewhere between $800 and $900. The attorney then said, "And you want $2,000 for the house? Now that it has stood for 14 years, is that what you think it is worth, $2,000? Anthony responded, "Yes, sir, it is worth that to me. It is all the home I have got." Other family members, such as Joseph Hundley, engaged in a long battle with the government with the help of Frank Armistead to obtain just compensation for his oyster beds. This battle was not resolved until 1923, and most likely not in a way that reflected just compensation. Still other members wrote letters to the Navy to seek the return of land that had seemingly been excluded from the government takeover by the second presidential proclamation. Pictured here is a copy of the actual letter written by James Payne, the husband of Sarah Hundley Payne. Sadly, his efforts were not successful. 4 years after the presidential proclamations, the Navy determined that not enough people had opted to return to their land, and they withdrew the offer to return it to landowners. This letter is the final determination of the value of the Payne lot. Questions remain about whether the residents of the reservation were justly compensated for their properties, and they will most likely never be answered. Perhaps more importantly, the story of what happened to the families remains largely unknown. It is disturbing that there is no mention of the families on the website of the Naval Weapons Station, despite the fact that the history is discussed. Also, there are currently only 5 sentences about the families in the Wikipedia article on the weapons station. However, as Shannon Mahoney notes in her dissertation, the 60 years of occupation represented by the archaeological sites at Charles Corner are a critical and compelling part of African American history. Our family should do what it can to keep this history alive and make it known more widely. The Hunleys were resilient 100 years ago and remain resilient now.
Well, we do know a little about what happened to those families. We represent those families. My name is Johnette Gordon Weaver. I am a Hunley. I'm a Hunley through William Hunley, who was my 3rd great grandfather, who had sons, Anthony, Addison, Joseph, William, amongst others. I am a descendant from Addison. Addison had Addison. Addison had Joshua. Joshua had Myrtle, my mother, and she had me. You're going to notice in your programs, whether on virtually or your physical program, that it says, where do we go from here? And it gives a different description. There was a mix up. There's a little bit of lemon there, but we made lemonade out of it and we're going forward. I am now going to have my family, this beautiful array of women you see here, introduce themselves to you. And I'm going to start with the most special of them all, my cousin Antoinette.
Good afternoon. I'm Antoinette Bowie Anderson, great-granddaughter of Octavia and Anthony Hunley, granddaughter of Sarah Eliza Hunley Payne, and daughter of Victoria Bowie. I am a traditionalist as a generation. I'm 85 years old, feel like I'm about 45 some days. And I'm really happy to be here. My tie to the reservation is through my grandparents. I didn't know my great-grandmother, but I knew my grandmother very well. I was born in her house and grew up at her knee. So it's just wonderful to hear the story of my family over and over. And I've been in the last week, knowing that I was going to be here, replaying it more than one time. So it's just great to be here today.
Bonnie.
And I am Yvonne Johnson. Everyone at home knows me as Bonnie. Antoinette and I are from the same generation group, meaning not same age. I'm a baby boomer. However, we are one of the 18 first cousins. So Octavia Hundley was my great-grandmother, and my grandmother was Sarah Payne. I grew up in her house until my father was stationed overseas and we moved. But I grew up listening to the stories over and over again, and I love to tell the stories. So I'm happy to be here as one of the proud Hundleys who were free African Americans during the time before the Civil War.
Vicki.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vicki Anderson Simmons. This is my wonderful mom. I am also, therefore, the descendant of Anthony and Octavia, Sarah, Victoria.
Antoinette.
And I'm looking at her. I'm trying not to look at her because, oh, by the way, we cry a lot. We're going to try to make it through this without crying. And of course, my mother and father, Antoinette Anderson and Percy Anderson. I want to say that my son, Eric Anthony Glover, was supposed to originally be on this panel, but due to work obligations was not able to be here. So I am actually sitting in for him. I don't pretend to be 36. I'm a boomer, just turned 60, feeling like, sick, no, feeling like, feeling okay, I'm feeling okay. And I'm very happy to be here.
Kristen.
Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Lynn Allen. I am the descendant of William Bill Hunley, one of the sons of Octavia and Anthony Hunley. I too am, what am I, Gen X?
You're Gen X.
Gen X. I'm not telling my age. But I am happy to be here. I am always ecstatic when we can share this story to as many people as possible, because the story needs to be told. Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Sydney.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sydni Palmer Washington. My pronouns are they, them. I am a 22-year-old Gen Zer, and I am Williamsburg born and Newport News raised. Fun fact, I was born at the old Williamsburg Community Hospital, which is on the land that this building is currently on. Amazing, yes. I discovered that I was related to the Hunleys on my dad's side through Octavia Hunley, who is my fourth great aunt. I'm directly related to a bunch of other families on the reservation, such as the Washingtons, Schofields, Wallaces, Red Crosses, Harrises, Randalls, Roberts, and many, many more. I've been into family history and genealogy since I was about 13 years old. So it means a lot for me to be here, and I am just so very excited to be here.
So this is where the young people are.
There you go. Yes.
We share the story. We have young people on the Hundley History Committee who are extremely active in making sure they know exactly where they come from and who they come from. I'm going to ask you guys a question before I even ask the panelists a question. What are some basic human needs? Food, shelter, and water. Those are the three basics, correct? But nobody talks about the basic necessity of belonging, connectedness, knowing who you come from. Young people form gangs because they need to be connected. I contend, we contend that if you knew more about who you were and where you come from, and were inspired to do better and be better, maybe pull your pants up, maybe wear your hair a little different, maybe not be afraid to say what your pronouns are, maybe not be afraid to love who you love. Maybe if you knew who you were connected to, you would be inspired. It's not just Tulsa that has a story. We have a story too. Family. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. When did you first learn of your family history? And what did you learn about the reservation? And you can go in any order.
Oh, doesn't matter.
Okay, I'll go first.
So my understanding of our family history actually came in spurts because our family had a regular family reunion from the early 80s. And we had a relative, John Telefaro, who was our family historian, who actually, through the connections with his Aunt Sarah, just decided it's time for the cousins of all of these children to get together. So we started having these reunions, and they would always add these elements of history. So the photos you see, the largest photos you see of Anthony Octavia up front here, these were faces that I would see, but I never quite understood who they were. And then I had the pleasure of going to the real HU, Howard University. Sorry if you're, and I started, and it was actually there that I began learning about Black history, African history, the African diaspora and all that. So what would happen would be I'd go to school and then come to these reunions and start putting these pieces together. So that was the starting point. And I'm sure others will have other things they want to mention. So I won't talk about all of it, but I'm just saying that I felt very fragmented through those years, and slowly but surely started putting those pieces together through conversations with parents and aunts and uncles.
My first, what was the story? I first learned about the reservation from my grandmother. She talked all the time. I mean, every day almost she would mention someone or her parents or her siblings from the reservation. I had no idea. I was a young child. I had no idea what that meant or where it was. I had no conception of how close it was to where we live now. But Grandma used to always talk about how they lived, where they lived. Her one sister, Catherine, she always talked about. And then as an adult at one of the reunions that, in fact, the first reunion that Vicki just spoke of in 1985, that was when I really realized that it was a physical place that we could go to. We took a trip field trip, a busload of us to Naval Weapons Station. And we actually went on the grounds of Cheesecake Cemetery. And that was where I saw my great grandma's headstone. And I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. One of our elder people, cousins, fell on her knees and just was so emotional as she touched the headstone. Now, if you can imagine, they moved in 1919, and most of us, or most of them, hadn't been back in all that time, and that was 1985. So that was my first real time learning exactly what the history of the reservation was.
Well, I grew up, like I said before, hearing the stories from my grandmother. And then as I got in college, I started doing more research, and I connected with other family members. Margaret Knight was a genealogist, and she would once in a while send me hints to help research. And John Talifera he was also a very, very good family historian. As a matter of fact, he came to Richmond and stayed with me a week. Every morning, I would take him to the state library, and he would come back with all these notes that I'd have to, after working all day, type them up and give them back to him. And that was during the day when it was on a memory typewriter, so I don't have a copy of anything. Yeah, okay. But then later on, I just kept trying to find other hints, and then I joined Ancestry. Another relative who was an Allen, Ann Bruce Latimer, many of you knew her from First Baptist. She was a very accomplished pianist and choir director. Well, she used to tell us our grandmother's people were proud because they were Black and they were free. She also said that we were part Indian. So since we were from the reservation, I just associated that with the reservation. And come to find out, when I went to Ancestry, I didn't have anything with that. But I found out later when I got contacted by someone who was from the Kiskiak Indian tribe that Ancestry and these other organizations that do the DNA testing do not track that. And part of it is because people don't give their results, especially the indigenous people. So there's a whole lot that we're discovering, and it's just wonderful that we're reaching out. A lot of you in here are probably relatives that we have never met, but hello, cousin.
So I also remember going to some of those early family reunions in the 80s. My grandmother, Cora Harris Allen, was one of the daughters of William Bill Hunley. I never heard stories from her about the displacement. My father did, but she didn't talk about it. And we think the reason that she did not talk about it is because once they left, they were resilient. And they said, okay, we're going to pick up and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to rebuild better. And we're going to educate our children, and our children will serve this country. So they left that in the past. But we are here to tell that story. We're resilient too, but we want the world to know our story, our family story, our descendants' story. So I did not know about the history growing up until really I went to the 2018 family reunion. Was it 2018? 2016, I think. And Shannon Mahoney, who was doing her dissertation work here at William and Mary, gave an amazing presentation on the reservation. And it was mind-blowing. I mean, it was just something that I had to be a part of and had to share. So that was my aha moment, 2016. Just getting that information about the family story.
So similar to cousin Vicky, I learned about my family history in bits and pieces until it became a cohesive history. Some of my earliest memories included hearing about the reservation from my dad's side of the family. Hey, family. I would hear stories from my grandma, Barbara Washington, my dad, Howard Washington, and my aunts about family living on a reservation and eventually moving to either the Grove community in James City County or along Penniman Road in York County. And me being young, I didn't know what any of that meant. At the time, I had never heard of Black people living on a reservation. But as I got into genealogy, I realized that it was the reservation. My mom's side, hey family, they didn't really talk much about family history. It was mostly my grandpa Raymond Palmer and my mom Maria Washington relaying as much information as they knew to me. I think that there was a lot of generational trauma that affects this side of the family. And so a lot of it just wasn't talked about. My mom was able to actually take us to the Cheesecake Cemetery for a family reunion when I was about 7 years old.
Can you imagine having to have permission from the United States government to simply visit a grave? Can you imagine seeing those headstones in disrepair and being unable to repair them? The Navy won't take your money. But we're telling the story now. Times may be changing. What part of the reservation story propels you to want to tell the story and to want to learn more? Anybody, any order.
I was ready for this one. I have notes. All right. So you all saw on the video where you saw the headstone of Octavia Hunley, and they were talking about the Naval Weapons Station Yorktown. I want to read to you what is currently right now on the Naval Weapons Station website. It says, this is the description of the Naval Weapons Station. It says, the land of the Naval Weapons Station is a site rich in colonial history. The station sits amongst a setting of natural beauty surrounded by the distant echo of the first settlers of Virginia and the battle cries of the Revolutionary War. The site of the weapons station was acquired for the Navy by presidential proclamation on August 7th, 1918, and was at the time the largest naval installation in the world. Anybody hear anything about Black people up in there? Anything about a free Black community, anything about their resilience, anything about the fact that they had to leave in 30 days. For this reason, this committee worked with the state of Virginia to have a historic highway marker put at Gate 3 of the Naval Weapons Station Yorktown. And we're just getting started because we realize that there is still so much more to do in terms of actively engaging with the Naval Weapons Station. In some instances, and you may have heard or will be hearing about other stories of the reservation, the rich stories of all the families that came out of there. Yes, that's important. But I feel like we have unfinished business with the Naval Weapons Station because our ancestors are there, okay? And we, as descendants, actually have a right to visit Cheesecake Cemetery. But did you know we have to give 6 months notice in order to do that?
60 days.
60 days. See.
Look, don't.
I'm sorry. I got it wrong. I got 6 days.
Right.
60 days, 6 months, too long as far as I'm concerned. But the point that I'm making here is that to me, there are some legal aspects that we still need to deal with in terms of engaging directly with the Naval Weapons Station. We have been, quote, putting air quotes around this, nice for many, many years in terms of trying to engage with them in a collegial way, and it's not working. So I think what propels me as an attorney is I just want to get in there and look at what our rights are as citizens, as descendants. You heard the part about the just compensation. There's actually going to be a legal workshop on May 6th that someone may be talking about later, but William and Mary will be hosting a legal workshop to talk about descendants' rights. So all of these legal aspects really propel me to go forward because I just feel like our ancestors still need us to speak for them.
And I just want to piggyback on what Vicky said. I want them to update their website. I want them to correct the history. And that's why that marker is there. So every day when they go and they leave, they know we were there. And when you leave today, don't leave without this magnet for your refrigerator so that you knew, that you know, and your children know that our families were there.
What propels me is a more personal story. When my family, my grandmother and grandfather moved in 1919, the governor did give them additional time to move. My grandmother had, well, my grandparents had 3 children. My mother was 9 years old. My Uncle James was 7 years old. My Uncle Isaac was just, a baby. Yeah, he had just been born. And they had to move, not with all the things that we have now, like the vans, hand trucks, all that. They had probably used horse and buggy. During that time, that was a traumatic era, actually. World War I was just ending. The flu epidemic was rampant. And my grandmother was also pregnant again. So I can imagine, I can just see the family moving, you know, under those circumstances, having to leave their livelihood, their homes, and most of all, their deceased family. They wouldn't be able to go back to lay a wreath or visit the cemetery. So that compels me to want to know more, and I want to be able to go to the cemetery whenever I feel like it, to put a wreath or a flower on my grandparents' graves.
Part of the story that propelled me to learn more was how this thriving community of free and formerly enslaved Black folk got destroyed with such ease. And it upsets me, but it's not at all surprising. In school, I learned about eminent domain and didn't realize how close to home it was for me. Outside of school, I learned about other destroyed Black communities, such as Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Seneca Village in New York, and Oscarville, Georgia, but again, never knew how close to home it was for me. The ancestors deserve to have their stories known and told, and that's what drove me to learn more.
And
She's a star. We have a page that's on the local Black Histories website done by the village. And there's a section called Rising Stars on the Hunley page. We want you to take a look at it because as we speak about generational education and passing our history on, you will find other young people, and I'm sorry, I said she, they are a star. Sydney is the star. Sydney is our future. Sydney is our right now. And I don't want any of you to ever forget that. Check out, you're welcome, darling. Check out the local Black Histories page by the village And look at all of the families that are there. Vicky told y'all we're criers. I've been crying ever since we started.
Johnette, I just want to add one thing. I want you all to realize the reservation was not the only place confiscated through eminent domain.
Right.
It was this entire area. That lost town of Penniman, where DuPont was. There was Camp Perry. There was Fort Eustis, Mulberry Island, Hampton, Yorktown, Slabtown. So it was, and this was during a time, it was all happening at once. There were not many places that Black families could purchase land. You know that. And some people were displaced more than once. So I'm going to stop now because that Hundley emotion, it's just, I could not imagine them telling me today that I need to leave. I'm going to say, no, you need to go.
She spoke of families that were moved more than once. I'm a part of that Hundley branch that was vacated from the reservation and vacated from Magruder, which is now Camp Perry. There were exactly 39 years between the reservation move and eminent domain at Magruder. You want to talk about generational wealth? Tell me how you build it when you move within 39 years.
Right.
Tell me how you build it. And tell me why you want to keep it a secret.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We're going to go on to the very next question. And family. Tell me how you're engaging younger people and what you're doing.
So through the Hunley History Committee, we do have a growing list of young people in our family, like Sydney, like Leah, like Eric, and many more that join us. What do we meet? Like, we're meeting monthly now. We have monthly Zoom calls to discuss our long-term and near-term goals. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, through continuing to share the story, putting the call out for them to participate in our activities and our promotion and our marketing. And as we are getting a little bit older, like, they are totally helping us with all the tech, which is amazing. But we're tapping into things that they enjoy and do well, in an effort to get them to be engaged and to enjoy, being with a multi-generation history committee. So.
At this time, I just wanted to mention one of the other panelists actually a moderator who was going to co-moderate with Johnette. Her name is Leah Preston, and she has been extremely active with the Village Initiative work. The website that, I don't know if folks have heard about it or not. Maybe Johnette, you can share more about it. But Leah was also very motivated by not only the stories she heard at our reunions, but her own genealogical research. She's a photographer, so she captures story through photography. And she's been extremely helpful, just kind of putting herself out there and making herself available to us to deal with the tech, to deal with the coordination with William and Mary and other groups. So I wanted to just make sure that we mention her as well. I will also say, there's a part of this that's not necessarily about being on the, quote, history committee. And I'm sure, those of you in the room, I'm hoping that you do this. The regular everyday conversations that you're having with your children or your grandchildren or your nieces and nephews, that really is the stuff that sticks, the day-to-day conversation. I mean, you heard my mother say, she sat at her grandmother's knee and heard these stories, and Bonnie mentioned the same thing. So these conversations that come up are important because we're dealing in a world where we're talking about appreciating, quote, diversity. But when your young children are confronted with, let's say, conversations or situations where there's an unspoken assumption about who they are and where they came from and what that means, this is where those conversations get inserted. So in my case with my son, he had situations where he was the only Black child in, various magnet programs in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I'm very proud of that fact. But he also had people telling him, people as young as 8 years old, like kids when he was 8, who said to him he was in these programs because he was Black. And because, that child's parents told him that that's how he made it into these programs. See, there's a lot of assumptions that run with that. So then I have to sit down and have these conversations. And it's not just about getting angry, which I was when I heard this, but telling him who he was and telling him how to have these conversations grounded in something more that runs deeper than what some 8-year-old and their parents think about Black folks and where we belong was really important. Being able to say to him, this is who you are. This is where you came from. These are your people. Look at what they did. That kind of stuff sticks. And I would just invite you to continue to have those conversations. You don't have to wait for these, big, humongous moments. Just have the conversations on a day-to-day basis.
And let's not forget that they're not getting these stories in school either.
Hello?
And moving down the line is where we're noticing what's going on on the news. They want to take this type of history out of the public school system. So families, if you have a story to tell them, because they're not going to get it anywhere else.
Not letting Sydney answer that question. Not allowed to. You are the younger generation. Finally, how would you like to see your findings used? Well, no, we're not at the final question. We're going to talk about research.
Right.
What have you been finding out as you do research? What would you like to share? And are you only researching the Hunley family, or are you looking into families from the reservation as a whole?
So I've been finding a lot more information about the lives of community members through written record. Birth records, marriage records, death and census records all give insight into community members' careers, families, land, and more. As stated before, I, like many of my cousins here, are related to a lot of different families from the reservation. So family research and community research are just about one and the same.
I have been responsible for Sarah's branch, building that branch on our family tree. However, anytime I come in contact with someone and we're related, I try to make that connection. And most recently, last week, I was going through some of my mother's papers and I found a letter from the first Payne Randall Allen reunion in 2005 that took place at Obadiah and Brenda Andrews' home in Williamsburg. And there was one number on there and I happened to call her, Ann McLeod in Maryland. She probably thought I was a telemarketer. And then I told her right away who I was. And it was, I'm telling you, it was just so emotional. And then she connected us with Elisa, who has this page on Facebook. So if you're a Payne, Randall, Allen, and probably everybody else in Williamsburg, hit that page up, as well as Friends of the Reservation Charles Corner. That is our outward facing organization. But just anytime I run into someone, I try to make that connection. And Dr. Johnson has sent some suggestions, and it turns out everybody he sends me, I'm related to, or I have a DNA connection. And I think one of your colleagues, I just did a search, Wanamaker. I think Wanamaker. Okay. And there was a DNA connection there. So it's just, you don't know who you don't know until you know them. And you only get to know them if you look for them.
I just wanted to reference a couple of studies that actually came out of either people who attended William and Mary or are maybe still working here. You heard on the video, Shannon Mahoney, Dr. Shannon Mahoney. She has a seminal study on the reservation called Community Building After Emancipation. It has a longer title after that, but if you look up Shannon Mahoney, Community Building After Emancipation, it'll come up. It's a PDF. It's a wonderful study. She's thorough. And we call her cousin. She is a wonderful person, and it has been very respectful. I'm not talking out of school. This is what she said to me. She said, I'm just a white Irish girl from California, and I deeply respect this story. And the reason that she did this dissertation on this topic was because she knew that this story was not being told and it needed to be told. So I am personally eternally grateful to Shannon for her work. Also, there's another one called Cast Down Your Bucket Where You Are. It has a subtitle as well. I believe it's Dr. Kathleen Bragdon and Dr. McDonald. If you look that up, you'll see more information, which actually includes a little bit about the indigenous people, but it also has interviews with family members of ours and perhaps some of yours as well. As a former government employee, I can't tell you the importance of utilizing the Freedom of Information Act in order to request information from the government. This whole story, the records associated with the reservation are found in the National Archives and accessible through the Freedom of Information Act. How do I say this? I don't know that I can be diplomatic in saying this, but I'm just going to say it. When you send in a Freedom of Information Act request, basically it goes into a FOIA.gov and they identify an agency that needs to respond. In this case, it's the Navy. You already know how I feel about the Navy these days. So we have several FOIAs that we have submitted, and typically they never meet their deadlines because they have 90 days to respond. We recently received a bunch of maps, detailed maps on the reservation, which we requested over a year ago. But I'm just bringing that up to say that it is a resource and it is actually your right to have this information if you're not already aware of it. Our goal in terms of how we want to put these in buckets, what we want to do is to raise awareness, inspire action, and demand accountability. And so I think for conferences like this, yeah, you get energized, which is really great. And we are constantly doing research, and we're working with other reservation families as well to come together. But the accountability piece is key because this is still, as I mentioned to you before, a connection with our US government, which should be in service to us. And it hasn't been, at least with regard to this. So there's more to be done.
Anybody else want to respond to that? Okay, well, this branch of the family I met literally 4 years ago, maybe. Did not know anything about anything, but I saw there was going to be a family reunion and I was on it. I want to see what they're doing. I want to know where they're going. They have done the research, they have done the work. I started looking into the 18th century. I happen to know that, according to records, Nathaniel Burrell rented land to a Black man, George Morris, at the area that is currently called Naval Weapons Station. We know it as a reservation in 1768. I happen to know that David Hunley had a presence there in 1786. I happen to know that Thomas Hundley, the son of David, married Polly Elliott and paid taxes in that area in 1810. We have always been a presence. We have always been a presence in the military. Our fifth great grandfather, Anthony Roberts, served in the Revolutionary War as a wagoneer. My father was a career Marine. Bonnie is a military brat. My daughter graduated from the Naval Academy, and the year she graduated, or the year she was admitted, one of the professors, a tenured professor, said that she was only there because she was Black and female. Black and female in 2010. Let that marinate for a little while. It's not all about trauma. It's not all about trauma, because as bad as things were, we have always made lemonade out of lemons. I got one more question for my family, and I will take my seat. Do you have short-term, long-term goals? What are they, and what would you like to see happen? And before I sit, I want you to know I love you all. Love you too.
So yeah, we do have short and long-term goals, and we will be working with our internal group, which is the Hundley History Committee, and then our external facing group, which is Friends of the Reservation, Charles Corner. So near term, continue the education, continue to tell the story, take as many press calls and interviews that Johnette can swing our way. We are ready to do that.
Cemetery preservation.
Well, that's long term. We'll get there. So also establish ongoing relationship with the Navy. Vicki so passionately described what that relationship is like. We are going to continue to be the fly in the ointment. No more nice in quotes. We are going to be taking the gloves off very soon because we're just tired. Long-term goals, pursue designation of the Kiskiak or Cheesecake Cemetery as part of the National Register of Historic Places. That's real long-term, but we're determined to do that. Spearhead efforts for preservation of the headstones at Kiskiak Cheesecake Cemetery. As you saw in the presentation, they are in horrible disarray. We have offered to pay to have those restored, but going through a lot of rigmarole with the Navy to get that done, even though we're offering to pay for it. And then, as Vicki mentioned, push for the Yorktown Naval Weapons Station to include our story in their marketing and media, whether it's their website, pamphlets, visitor station, whatever it is. We are omitted, and we want to be a part of that, their story. We sacrificed our land for that naval installation, and that needs to be told.
Very good. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Got two hands.
Hello.
I would like Sydney to put a fire under her, I guess, family member, Cameron Hundley. My son is Charles and Maggie Hundley's grandson, and he is the only Hundley boy left to carry on the family name, as my husband has four brothers and 4 sisters. And my daughter, I know, helped with the village with part of a video presentation. And I sit here not even knowing if they're on your web history thing, because I don't think they are. And I'm just sitting here saying, if I'm going to give you my information,
Yes,
I'm going to give you both of their emails for you to set a fire. They both went to the marker. I wasn't able to go that day. And there's a picture of my daughter and touching her great, I guess, 5th grandmother. Great, I'm not sure exactly. But while, I want that fire to continue, because one day I'm going to have grandchildren and my son will have children, and I don't want the Hunley name to stop at him or the history. So before I leave, I need to get that to you all so that my children can be involved. And I don't know what it is about the Y generate, but I've heard things like they don't want their DNA used. You don't know what people are going to use it for. So there's something out there which is scary to them. And I'm not sure where that comes from. So that might be something Sydney, you might want to address as to why, I've tried, but I think it has to come from someone else, but thank
So,
you.
hey, cousin. So I meant to mention this earlier. I think it's important to meet them where they are, the younger generation. So I was thinking just the other day, well, this is an interesting story. Maybe somebody can write a play about it. Maybe somebody can do a documentary. Maybe somebody can do a musical. Maybe somebody can write some poems. So there's a way for people to engage that suits them and that actually still advances the story. They may not want to be, reading about something that it's important to know what happened, of course, but it's like, how can you integrate it in order to make it a part of your person? So I don't know how old your children are, but you said Gen Y. We can work with that. We can work with,
Ty is on our list, but Cameron isn't.
Okay,
Oh yeah, they're Gen Z. I can.
we got them.
Good afternoon, Hundley Family Committee. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
And you really treads a long way. However, my question is for Antoinette. And you mentioned your grandmother, who I would consider a primary source, talking about life on the reservation. And I just want to know, when she talked, I told you those stories, did she refer to it as the reservation or just what? Because we've had some questions as to where I hear people say Charles Corner, and then I hear the reservation. I just remember when I was a child and I asked my family, where do you come from? They just said reservation. So I'm trying to find out, where did that name reservation come from? So since Miss Sarah lived there and talked about it daily, I want to know from you, what did she refer to it as?
Grandma called it the reservation.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't learn about Charles Corner until much later. So that was her, I think that was the name they all used. And I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't think I know you, but. Oh, that's Rose. Oh, Rose. Oh, okay. Okay. Hi.
Is that Rosalie?
Okay, yeah,
That's
okay.
Rosalie. Hi,
Good to see you. Yeah.
Given by the government, though.
Any other
Maybe we
questions?
should say that. Oh, okay.
Well, we thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. And we look forward to sharing more. We want to really thank Amy Quirk, I see sitting over there. Amy is part of that Village Initiative who has tirelessly done oral histories and recorded for everybody. Take a look at the Village page one more time. Local Histories Project.
Take a picture, take a picture.
Thank you, wonderful job. Oh, take a picture. Take a picture.
But she knows the answer to the question.
Who's got a Samsung?
I do not have
My picture.
All right, well, this concludes our sessions for today. So we'll take a break from 4:15 to 6 p.m. and we'll return for our performance tonight by the Talking Drum presented by the Elba Folklore Society. So we invite you to come out this evening from 6 to 7 for that presentation. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to you returning tomorrow. We have a full day. So again, thank you so much, and thank you to the reservation group. Thank you to the Hundley